Good.
Hello everyone, I am a geek for fun, or you can just call me Alfie. And those familiar to the channel might be like, what, an interview series on Geeks for Fun? It's been a while since we've done Sitting with Superman, the series where I take creators or members of the fandom from Superman, sit them down and just talk about the big blue Boy Scout. This time, though, is probably the most prestigious guest we've got so far and may ever get. Someone who has took the Superman books by the reins and absolutely shook them until Clark Kent has been tested in ways he's never felt before. All across the line, this will be foul, and if you've not been keeping up with the Action Comics run, you need to. The one, the only, Mr. Philip Kennedy Johnson.
Thanks for having me, Alfie. It's good to meet you.
It's great to meet you too, sir. I've been following the Superman books for, I think, since just the New 52, and keeping on with online discussions about them. Normally you just hear like Batman all the time, and maybe the odd like Amazing Spider-Man or X-Men. But since you've come on the book, it really feels like the Superman line as a whole has had this massive wave of push going towards it, and it's been really refreshing to see. So I guess my first question, before we move into more personal things, is, has that been a intentional move, or is that kind of just we seem to have the media attention on us right now?
It's what I wanted for sure. Superman was always like my hero from the time I was a little kid, and Batman too. I'm not going to say that I don't love them both. I do. They represent very different power fantasies for me, and I needed Superman real bad as a young reader, and just meant a ton to me. So but Batman is the one that always gets a lot of attention, right? Like, he's super cool. He's always very beloved, and I just really want Superman to get that same kind of respect. I really love what Superman means to people, what he should mean to people. And it was a really fun and rewarding challenge to try to get more eyes on him, to try to, I have such a clear vision in my mind of who Superman is. And when it's done well, when it's executed well, when that vision of who he is really brought forth and made clear, I feel like he is such an inspirational character in a way that, in my opinion, in a way that no other superhero is, and no other character in pop culture is. I want people to believe in that character, that absolute power does not have to corrupt. That you can be powerful and also inherently good and compassionate and humble, and that's what I want. I want to put that in front of people and try to bolster that attention as much as I can. And it's still, it's a work in progress, and will continue to be so. But we're still trying to get as many eyes on it as we can, and just kind of kick the tires on who the character is and what he means, and try to make the meaning of Superman very clear and very prominent.
You mentioned that since you were a kid. Let's get into that a little bit. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like, and what was the earliest introduction with Superman there?
Childhood was kind of lonely, I guess. Kind of not super fun. Not to like overshare, but it's
please. This is your time, sir.
Didn't have a lot of. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. So this is my therapy. I'm going to do a live stream where I talk about my childhood sadness. No, it was not a house where a lot of playtime happened, really, but in fact, it was pretty extreme. Like, my dad actually did not believe in the concept of toys, so there just weren't a lot of toys in the house. I think I got a stuffed lion for one Christmas at one point, and I was pretty small, so I did have him. But mostly it was like Lincoln Logs and puzzles and like little problem solving type things. But aside from that, it was just books. Books and tools and stuff. Like this weird experiment kind of approach to childhood, to child rearing. And even the books were not like little kid books. Like, Dad and I did get read to a lot, but it was stuff like Macbeth and like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, and not like books on medieval architecture, just like stuff that you would not expect a little kid to read. So stuff I certainly would not have read on my own.
Like you just turn up to like the kindergarten and everyone's sharing their books, and you've got like, well, this is My Little Pony, and you're just there with like the complete works of Shakespeare.
Yeah. Let's see. Canterbury Tales was in there. It's just really odd choices, and this gave me a really interesting picture of what English was. The English language. There's a book on Andersonville Prison and Civil War. It's like a lot of really crazy choices. Anyway, I digress. But my dad did say that he taught himself to read from comics when he was very small, and so although like story time would always revolve around these adult books. He did bring home these boxes of ripped up comics that he would get from garage sales or flea markets or just like stuff that he would buy second and third hand, and he just regarded it as junk that I could just kind of play with and figure out what words mean and associate them with pictures. But I really fell in love with them in a way that Dad didn't, I guess. Like, not that he didn't. I'm sure he loved them as a kid too, but he grew out of it pretty quickly, I guess, and lost interest. Where I just really I love those. I love the comics medium.
You got the taste.
And I would, yeah, and I made my own even from a young age. I just drew my own pictures in a sequential storytelling kind of format. And I really got a lot out of Batman and Superman stories and like Spider-Man team ups and even some of the cartoony stuff like Scrooge McDuck or whatever. I just took a lot of lessons from it, but the Batman Superman stories especially just really spoke to me about heroism and what it means to be great. Like ways in which you can make, like, Batman represented this fantasy for me that I could, it's the story about Bruce Wayne, about this kid who grew up alone and lonely and sad and angry and kind of built himself into this powerful thing, by himself. It was really a powerful thing. And Superman was a story about a kid who didn't understand his place in the world. It was kind of lost and alone, and discovers that he was sent there by people who loved him to save everyone, to do great things. And those were fantasies that just really spoke to me, and it gave me this imaginary framework in which I just kind of lived my life. I really lived my life in my imagination, very much in these fairy tale stories that I would make up my own that were in that same, basically I was making up fan fiction stories whenever I was playing by myself. I would imagine I was one of those guys and make up my own adventures. So yeah, both characters really meant a lot to me growing up.
And does that immediately make you think, because you mentioned fan fiction there, okay, I want to do this? When does I want to be a writer come into it?
Well, I was a writer as soon as I could pick up a pencil.
Really?
I never really thought about doing it professionally per se. I wasn't really thinking about how to make money or anything. I just made things from the time I was very small. I would play music or write music or write stories and draw them and just make pictures or whatever. I would just make stuff. I just wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. It wasn't about becoming a writer, because that's kind of how I lived my life from the time I was able to do anything. When I was able to make my own decisions about anything, I was making stuff. And for a while, like when I became older, when I was getting into the later years in school, it became clear that at least for where I was in the school I was at, I was making the most out of my opportunities in music. It seemed like music was the thing I was probably best at, that I could use to get out of there. I just started pursuing music very seriously in sort of a professional capacity. It's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a professional musician. That was my first legit professional pursuit. And then later, after I'd already established myself as a musician, I started to get that new professional itch to do something else. I wanted another creative outlet, and that's when I started to turn to writing again.
That's incredible. Like you could already have the movie success story of the kid who who has all these things in this childhood, but really wants to write all these things and makes music, and then you make it as a musician, and then you're like, you know what else I want to do? I also want to write the character that I found. As that is absolutely incredible. That is
Well,
really,
thanks,
really good.
man.
What is
I appreciate it. Yeah.
I want to get into a little
That
bit on the continue.
no. Oh well, I was just going to say that the writing thing came along almost accidentally.
Mm.
I had a younger brother who was also a trumpet player, and as I play trumpet. He was also a trumpet player and artist, and he kind of went the other way. He decided he wanted to be an artist and didn't really know how to get started. And at some point, I was just like, "Look, just if you don't know what to do next, just come move in with me. I live in the Washington D.C. area now. Um, Move in with me. We'll start going to conventions. We'll start going to comic shops. We'll see what the state of the art is like now, and we'll just figure it out. We'll buy the book, comic books for dummies, and just figure out how to do this thing." And I just started writing again just to give him a portfolio, just because he didn't really have much. He's making pinups and single images of superheroes looking cool, but he didn't really know how to put together a page, like a page of sequentials.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I started writing short stories and poems just for him to illustrate, and it was super fun. I started looking for other artists to work with, and one of those became my first printed book, and it sort of worked out.
So in that field, just kind of finding writing and stuff, when you're learning to write, because obviously, actually, you'll know this better than me. How different is it, your approach to writing music versus writing comic? Because they're both kind of focused on rhythm and like beats, but I think you'd be the expert on that, which I think is a very unique position you're in.
They are similar. It's not so much about the rhythm as it is um, the collaborative nature of it. When you're playing music as part of a group, you really have to just let your ears just grow and grow and just listen to everything happening around you and being very reactive to the other people in the group. Um, Comics is very much like that too. You can't just create in a vacuum. I know there are people who do. I'm sure some of them see great success, but I feel like the product will always be better the more you interact with your team. And I mean, I've done my first two creator-owned books, Last Sons of America and Warlords of Appalachia, were the exact same creative team except for the penciler. I mean, the same colorist, same letterer, same editor. I wrote them both, and they look completely different. And I would have written them completely differently if it had been the same team for the second book. I would have
Hmm.
written it very differently. And if only the letterer had changed, or only the inker, or only the colorist, or anything, it would have that would have also changed the book a lot. Like any one person being replaced can completely change the product. And it's that way in music as well. If you're playing small group jazz and you switch out the bass player, it's a big difference. So yeah, that collaborative nature is the biggest similarity, and the element of time is very important in both too. You're right, but it's different, I guess. Um, because as the writer, you're kind of dictating the pace, dictating the beats, like the beats of dialogue, but also the how dense each page is, what the big page turn moments are, because there's the rhythm is kind of built in with the page turns. Like you want there to be some kind of a mini cliffhanger at the end of every two pages. So at the end of an odd number page, there should be something that compels the reader to turn the page, and then there has to be kind of a flow that leads the reader's eye through the page and across the next page to the bottom. And that rhythm is dictated mostly by the artists, um, primarily by the penciler, and then kind of the mood and the energy can be communicated very well with through the colorist. Everyone's kind of got their role the way the people in the jazz combo do. But is in a music group, the rhythm is communicated more from the entire group and more from like the bass voice and the percussion and all that. But the writer kind of dictates the the tempo and where the big beats are, on the page.
And is this something when, speaking just in terms specifically on your end of the comic writing spectrum, from what you've described of your history of coming into us, you're effectively entirely self-taught? Or did you have any, when you were brought into comics and you first started doing it, was there anyone who kind of like showed you the ropes, or did you entirely kind of have to just make it, like fake it till you make it kind of thing, or just jump straight into it?
I was self-taught in as much as I sought out the information. I learned from a ton of people, but it wasn't so much in a formal class or anything like that. It was by seeing what scripts look like, to see, finding the work by writers I admired, and seeing how they approach things, and going to panels they were speaking on, listening to them talk about their craft, and asking questions on those panels sometimes. And also from artists and editors and publishers and everyone else involved. So I am self-taught to the degree that I had to seek out the knowledge myself, but I learned thousands of lessons from really great creators, like, that all had a lot to teach me. I kind of discovered who I wanted to emulate, like which writers I really wanted to write, like which stories I wanted to kind of mimic in my own work, and just kind of find the elements of those writers that I thought were so powerful.
Do you, I was going to say, do you think we can, if you had to name any of like the big name, like comic writers that had that influence on you?
If I had to name one mentor in the comics, well, man, I can't say one. If I were to say two, I would say Ron Mars and Scott Snyder. Ron if I had to thank one person for getting me just in the door in the comics industry, it's Ron Mars. That guy. Well, for one thing, I loved his Green Lantern run back when I was a kid, before I even knew who I was. But way before I actually read the credits page or gave a shit who was making it. I just really liked Emerald Twilight. I thought that was a really kick-ass story, and I love that. I love the character of Kyle Rayner. As much as I loved Hal Jordan before that, and how much as I hate seeing him become a bad guy, I thought that story of him kind of going off the rails was very powerful, and seeing Kyle Rayner show up was really cool. That was a really powerful story that invested me a lot. But then later on, I wrote a blog post on the blog that I was then keeping up, comparing the comics medium with jazz. And I was regularly reading this column on CBR called Shelf Life that Ron wrote. And it seemed, my blog post felt like something that Ron might post on Shelf Life. And so I reached out to him without any idea who he was or what he had done. I thought he was just the guy that wrote Shelf Life to me. I didn't really know anyone's name. And I was like, I had this piece. I just emailed him out of the blue. I was like, I had this thing that I wrote that I kind of want to put in front of more eyes, because basically no one reads my blog. Like, what do you think I should do to get it out there? Do you have any advice for me to get it read by, journalism sites or anything? And he sent it to Jonah Weiland, who at that time was running CBR, and he got it published on CBR, which he totally didn't have to do, and I never would have asked him for. But I met him up at a convention, I think maybe San Diego, and bought him a coffee and just kind of talked him up, and we became friends. And he introduced me to a ton of people and told me a lot about the craft. And I'd been reading a lot of his stuff about craft on CBR. Some of it was just anecdotes about his life in the industry. Some of it was about his love of a certain creator, or things that he had done, or stories he lived. And some of it was about how to make comics. And I found them extremely helpful. He had, at some point, I got a hold of a script template that he had written. I can't remember if he posted it somewhere or if he just sent it to me. But I still use the format that I still use in my scripts is one that's basically based on Ron's. So that still makes a lot of sense to me. It's just very clear and concise, very easy for an artist or editor to make sense of. Just scan through and just very easily read what's happening. As far as format, that's all taken from Ron's thing. So Ron's a very helpful dude. And I love that he has he has kind of shepherded people that he regarded as talented, and been very helpful to them along the way. Other people that he kind of discovered and helped get their foot in the door were Stephanie Phillips and Ron V. And now all three of us are very active at DC. Mm-hmm. Not that he introduced us to anyone there. He helped us get noticed, or helped us to kind of figure out what the hell we're doing. So Ron for sure. The other person I named, Scott Snyder, obviously made his bones on American Vampire, on Batman. Batman was his first big, like, well, I mean, you can't say that because American Vampire got a lot of eyes on it too. But that's kind of where he showed up, was American Vampire and Batman. Um, he is a huge influence on me. When I first read American Vampire, I was like, who the fuck is this? This guy's amazing. And I sought out his book of short stories that he wrote called Voodoo Heart. I was like, dude, this guy just knows what he's doing. Has such command of English and of the comics medium too. Sometimes you see somebody who's a great prose writer will not necessarily translate well into comics, and Scott does both so well. And I had the opportunity to study with him more directly. If I had one formal comics teacher, it would have been it's Scott because because I did the DC Writers Workshop in 2018, I believe, and Scott taught it. So I had a 13-week course, like a workshop with 5 other writers, with Scott teaching the whole thing. And then that's where I learned about form, basically about 3-act structure and stuff that I should have known before that. I mean, stuff that I was aware of, like vaguely aware, but not something I really thought about much consciously as I was writing. Sometimes I would, compare it to other kinds of stories, and I'd just through osmosis learned 3-act structure just from watching a bajillion movies and reading books and other comics. But I wasn't thinking about the big beats of 3-act structure and like how the flow is going to go, how the emotional arc and the plot arc intersect and all that stuff. Everything I know about form, I learned from Scott, basically, and other important things too. So Scott was a huge influence on me. Other writers that I've learned a lot from, just from their awesome work,
Mm-hmm.
I would say Ed Brubaker is like a top 5 guy for me. Rick Remender, the way that he is just hard as hell on his characters, and the way that he invests you in his stories and his characters, how the stories are all about character, and you just not afraid to put his characters through to make big changes. Sometimes I find myself kind of subconsciously protecting my characters, kind of protecting them from the worst things that could happen. And Remender just puts everyone in the meat grinder, and in a way that I think is very powerful and really gets you invested. Let's see, Remender, Brubaker, Snyder, Mars, Mike Mignola is a huge influence. The films of Guillermo del Toro, the music of Charles Mingus. I know it sounds weird to cite a musician as a comics influence.
I mean, I was literally about to segue into like what were the non-comic influences, because it's not like you exist in entirely the only things you consume are comics. Is you read your Superman run and it feels so lived in. So I was like thinking, like Del Toro and all those kind of things. Like what are the strictly stuff that isn't from comics that influences your comics, and maybe like Superman specifically?
Yeah, the music of Charles Mingus, Thelonious Monk, of Igor Stravinsky. These things are all big influences on my writing, and also movies and shows. Like, yeah, the work of Del Toro first and foremost, for as far as film, and the Alien films and the Breaking Bad TV series. That show made me a better writer and made a better musician. It's hard to even describe how I mean that, but
it's good stuff.
It's just, the quality is so unbelievably high. Sometimes you read or watch or play or whatever, experience some kind of great cultural thing,
and it just gets you, something just clicks.
Yeah, sometimes you're watching something and you're like, man, I wish they would have done it like this.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about, this would have made it so much cooler. And I don't know why this just popped into my head, but for example, episode 1, Star Wars episode 1 is I was so excited to see that movie, because it's, after the first trilogy, that was complete when I was like 5 years old. And for a long time, everyone just thought there would never be another Star Wars movie.
Right.
Like The Godfather, like Godfather's done. There's no more, there's no more Star Wars. And then suddenly there are these trailers for the next one. You're like, I've never been so excited in my life. And the world building in that first trilogy, it just hinted at the world being so much bigger. And since then, we'd seen all these books come out and comics and like games and other stuff had come out, and then we thought that that's the only way that Star Wars was ever going to grow now because the movies are over. And then I was just I've always been so into the concept of world building. I was like, man, we're going to see so much more of the world. And I remember the name, like I remember fantasizing about where the name Skywalker could have come from. Like, what could that mean? And when we meet Anakin, his name is already just Skywalker. Right. That's his name. There's no questioning it. And he wins that pod race. And it does, I don't know. Like, I remember thinking, wouldn't it have been cool if, as a slave, they had not had names, and then Jabba or whoever the officiant or whoever the the celebrant or the officiator of the race had granted him the name Skywalker when he was granted his freedom. Like, let's say now you've earned your freedom, you're free of slavery, and it's my duty to give you a name. And because of some crazy stunt that you did in the race, I'm giving you the name Skywalker. And we got to learn where the name Skywalker came from.
That's really good. I've never thought of it like to completely to maybe you've made that, because again, you're still getting like Anakin gets that name from someone because he's eventually going to abandon Skywalker, right? So maybe even that's like something his mum gives him as like a cute
right
name. And then when he gets rid of it, it's like, oh no. So that's genius. Right? That's really good.
The thing from his mom would have been cool too, or from if he could have been given that name from Qui-Gon or who.
Right?
There could have been some really cool way for him to get that name. And then every time we hear the word Skywalker after that, we know the origin. Like when we see something that made the original trilogy cooler, you know. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll watch a show or movie or a game or something, and I'll think, oh, if only they'd done this other thing. And I try not to, shit on other people's work, because, I mean, making anything is difficult and a lot of work and labor of love usually. But sometimes you'll be like, you can't help but think, I would have done it like this, like in our hubris, kind of think about how we would have done it better or something. But with the shows, sometimes you watch something like Breaking Bad or Pan's Labyrinth or what's another one? Band of Brothers, something that's just like this unbelievable work, and you're like, yeah, okay, these guys are better than me. and you're just you're just so inspired by what you're saying. Like, this is perfect. This is a perfect experience, perfect show. And you just learn so much from those things where you could not, you're surprised by all these decisions that you never would have thought of, the things that, somebody whose influences are clearly so different than your own, and somebody who's writing at such a high level, and then all with this huge creative team, and they're all like just firing on all cylinders. Those experiences are these religious moments for me, where I learned so much from them, and I'm so inspired by them, and it makes me better at other things that are not even directly related to that thing.
That's really so satisfying. If you kind of carry on that point, because I'm loving the point you're making right now.
No, that's it.
That's so satisfying to hear from you, because something I struggled with as I'm trying to write my own more stuff and stuff is just the more you learn about writing, the more you can get frustrated by the bad stuff. And you've got way more experience and in the trenches than that. You've seen behind the curtain. You've kind of been in the business of deadlines, and you've got sometimes when editorial changes things, or not necessarily things, but just it's very easy once you're just on the bystander to critique. But once you're actually a writer, you grow that a little bit more sympathetic. To hear you still be like, I just get so pumped when this one I could never do. That is so, you never lose it. You never lose the joy of writing, the love of the craft, to see it done well.
It's important not to. I try not to take on so many writing jobs that I can't do my best work anymore. Mm-hmm. And I almost made that mistake this year. I got a chance to pitch for this, and this is after I was already writing Superman. I'm writing Action Comics. At the time, I think I might have been writing the Superman series as well. Writing Alien, another thing I have huge affection for, and I've always loved. I think I might have been writing a Carnage thing, and then I got offered the opportunity to pitch for this other thing that was every bit as big as all that other stuff. I was like, oh my God, I can't turn this down. Like, what if this never comes again? Like, I might never get another chance pitch for this book. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. So I put together a pitch for it, and it was okay. But I turned it in, and I didn't feel good about it. And I got a bunch of notes back on the pitch, and I was like, fuck, I shouldn't have sent this. And I, rather than revise it, because they wanted me, they saw promise in it, and they wanted to
Right.
see another version of it. They're like, here are our notes for it. And I realized that I wasn't really making it sing yet. I was like, this isn't right. This is not what I wanted to do with this character. I do not have the bandwidth. I love this character dearly, but I'm making a mistake. And so I, as politely, humbly as I could, I declined. I was like, I'm really sorry. I mean, I shouldn't have said this to you guys. I'm way overstretched. I knew it was a mistake to throw my hat in the ring for this. Let's please do this another time. Like, please come back to me. I would love to do this, but I can't do it this year. Um, if I'd taken that book, I'd be screwing up Superman right now, as well as that other thing that I love. So I sometimes I get. I mean, and I know I see the work of other people. Not, I mean, not a lot of people. There's a couple of names of people that I know are profoundly gifted, who have kind of fallen into that trap of like, I'm just going to do everything because I'm awesome and I want to. And you can kind of tell when they phone it in. And sometimes I'm reading a story, I'm like, this is a really talented writer who is phoning it in, or an artist who's phoning it in. And sometimes I'm writing it and I feel myself phoning it in. I'm like, I'm just trying to get it done by Friday. And I kind of sit back and I look at it and I'm like, is this great? I want this to be great. Like, I'm not willing to do work that's not great, at least that I am super proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll step away from it and I'll read something that is great, like meaningfully great, like the Rubin Garcia translation of Beowulf, that I think is fucking unbelievable. That just really raised the bar for me, like what comics can do. Um, what's the other thing? My favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris, which is another absolute top shelf book. Um, the first, if we're talking about superhero stuff, the first volume of Court of Owls by Snyder and Capullo is like a masterclass in big two superhero writing. Same thing for Bendis's Avengers run, New Avengers run.
Mm-hmm.
What's another like big ass book? Hellboy stuff. There's certain volumes of Hellboy that I think are just as good as they could be. What are some others? It was War of the Trenches is a cool one that Fantagraphics put out, I believe. There are a bunch of books that just changed my perception of comics, that showed me what was possible. And when I need stimulation, when I feel like I'm in the trench, I'm like, I just got to get out of here. I got to get through this. I got to turn this thing in. I just got to knock out 20 pages of shit, and then I get paid. I don't let that happen. Even if I'm like a day late, I need to go back and read something that inspires me and remind me how lucky I am to have this fucking job, and not take it for granted, and make sure that I'm turning in work that inspires someone. I want every book to be somebody's favorite. Even if it's just one kid, I want every volume, every issue to be somebody's favorite book when it comes out. And you know, I'll never know if I've achieved that, but I just can't phone it in, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's really important to me.
it feels wrong to do it after all the things you do. It's like it's getting the paycheck and stuff. You'll have those tired moments, but there's just a part of you in the back of you being like, no, I'm better than this. Come on, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
sure. I know there's going to be other writers or even just readers to whom my work just does not speak. Like, I know that I'm not saying that everyone loves my work.
Oh,
Like, I
of
know there are
course,
people
yeah.
who like, hey, KJ doesn't do it for me. That's totally fine. Like, I know there's people who just prefer other writers, prefer other kinds of comics, who just don't like my voice in general. That's totally fine. Everyone's got their own thing. I don't need to be loved by everyone, but I do need to put on my best work all the time, so that people who do like my work in general, who are on the same wavelength, I want them to love it.
Hmm.
So yeah,
But
that's the idea.
in regards to that, I do want to make sure we get to the Superman centric things, but you mentioned very early on in this the gift of collaborations, and you're kind of, well, at the moment you're probably in the midst of it because you're ahead of us, but we recently see a artist switch over with Action Comics. You forgive me if I mispronounce these names because I only read them. Daniel Sampari.
Yeah, Daniel Sampari.
He was your original. Well, Michael Janine was the originally on the Future State stuff. But he was the one that was originally on Action Comics for that early portion, leading us into the Warworld saga. What was it like working with him, and something specifically I don't think you've talked about before that I'm interested in? You've really built up Warworld and like the mythology of it and designed these champions. What was like the process behind that, of the process of like, all right, this is what I want these to look like? How much of a back and forth was that? How much for things like that? Like, what did that look like, you two together bringing Warworld to life? And if it was any other one involved or into that?
Are we talking about me and Mikkel Hanin or Daniel?
Daniel. If Janine was involved in that early on as well, but I'm just curious of that artistic process and your artistic collaborators.
Mikkel and I worked on Warworld a bit in Warworld Saga. Excuse me, in Worlds of War, I mean, the Future State issues.
Right.
And so we used his design of the arena in, later on in the Warworld Saga when that began. But as far as I did a lot of world building in Warworld before anything actually got made it onto the page. I wanted to know like the whole philosophy about chains there, like the way that Mongol has kind of built this cult of slavery there, and this cult of personality, this propaganda machine that makes himself a god there. That's all well established on Warworld, and I had to know the answers before we actually started showing stuff on the page. And sometimes there are things that show up on the page that I did not intend, and I'll find ways to write them in. Rather than be like, no, this is not right. Do my bidding, monkey. I don't want Daniel to feel like an art monkey that's just doing what I tell him to do. We're collaborators, So sometimes something will show up on the page that I did not intend, but it looks cool. So let's just find a way to make it work. And that has led to some really cool stuff. I mean, not just on Superman, but on other books too. Famously, in The Last God, there's a scene. For anyone who doesn't know, listening, that's my epic fantasy horror book I did at DC Black Label. It's like Lord of the Rings meets body horror, kind of. And there's a scene in which this palace is burning. And it's a very patriarchal society where women kind of don't have a voice. And there's a statue on the front steps of a woman in armor with a sword and shield looking super badass. And the palace is burning behind her. The panel looked amazing. Because, I mean, Riccardo Federici did the art, and that guy is a fucking superstar. And it looks so great. I wasn't going to tell him to change it, but I was like, it kind of doesn't make sense for a woman to be in such a prominent place or to be dressed like that in the Tirgaladan society. But then that kind of interested me. It's like, okay, well, she's there, so how do we make sense of it? And I kind of thought of the story about this woman who became a very important part of the mythology of that world. Her name, and then she became known as Q Lee, Queen of Rivers, and she was remembered in human and elven society in very different ways. She's kind of revered as an elven hero, even though she's human. But humans have this other made-up history of how she became who she was, and it really just thickened up the mythology a lot and it became the seeds for a lot of parts of the history that I wrote after that. Rather than, I could have just told them, no, erase it, make it a guy or make it some other thing, and we would have lost all that. If I had just asked Ricardo to do exactly what I tell him and nothing else. And now there's similar stuff like that happening in action too. In fact, something like that happened in the first issue of Warworld Saga that Daniel did. Daniel drew these vehicles. He was kind of under the gun schedule wise. And I described these. I told him that there are many different tribes of Warzoons on Warworld, because I don't like it when you go to a foreign planet and you see people with 2 arms and 2 legs that are basically look like us, speaking English, and I don't know, this bugs me. I want to see like crazy culture changes. Same thing for Atlantis or, Themyscira. I want to see big differences,
Right.
things. I want to see mind-blowing world building.
We're comics. We don't have to do the cheap like early Star Trek thing where we paint an actor a different like. Let's just go balls to the walls. Let's go crazy.
Yeah,
So
totally. Exactly. Let's do something nuts. So it's all just lines on a page. Like we don't have to pay for the sets. So let's just draw some crazy shit. And Daniel's got amazing chops. So I mean, I know he can do it. And I described one of the tribes. Anyway, so I wanted to see a bunch of different tribes of Warzoons on Warworld because I mean, it's not like we have just one race of humanity here on Earth that all speak the same language and wear the same stuff and all work together towards this common goal. We all fight like crazy, even just within the county where I live. Let alone state to state or nation to nation or continent to continent. There's big differences. So I told him I described different tribes of Warzoons different ways. And one of them, I compared them to something you'd see in Fury Road. And he drew, and I found some different fantasy artwork online, just give him some ideas of what their armor might look like, what their features might look like, just random stuff for him to pull from and just do his own thing. I didn't want to micromanage him. I want to just let him know what I was seeing.
As an artist, always reference is king, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I want him to see what I'm envisioning, and then just take the aspects that he likes and run with it, the things that suit him, that suit his style. And he did that. And the only complaint that I would have had is that the vehicles that he was drawing looked a little too similar to Earth, like to cars, into real cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is another planet. Like, should they look that similar to cars, like with four wheels and headlights? What else could we do? But we were under the gun. He had to get it done, and he was running, not late, but it was getting close. So I didn't really want to burden him with this other note because everything looked great. It just wasn't quite what I envisioned. And I was like, what if there was a reason for it? What if there was a reason for them to have vehicles that look like ours there? And so I imagined this story in which, when Clark was still a little bitty kid, Warworld discovered Earth and tried to conquer us the way that they do so many other worlds. What if Warworld actually came to us? And so I imagine that there was a scouting party of Warzoons that found Earth and came here and like just kind of scoped it out and actually grabbed a certain number of human slaves and vehicles and weapons and things and took them back to Warworld. And then the only reason that we were saved is because they found some easier prey that was closer and just more resource rich. And so we were kind of forgotten about because of that, because we were just small potatoes and they found something better. And we kind of fell off the radar again. But then, so now there's this, when Superman and the Authority go to Warworld, there are still some elderly humans there as slaves somewhere that were alien abducted.
That's so fucked up. It's the highest compliment I could give. That's so fucked up.
Yeah, thanks. And these, they have some old ass, cars there, and they, even though under the hood it's all completely different, there were elements of those weapons and cars and things that they grabbed that they liked and repurposed that this one particular tribe used. So now we're seeing the descendants of those scouts and how our vehicles kind of worked our way into their culture and technology.
Okay.
So
the big boy, I guess, for the foreseeable future of your run, the main central Superman rogue that you're really focusing on so far, at least, is Mongol. Not the Mongol people may be familiar with, but the son of that Mongol introduced by Bendis previously in his run that you've kind of taken on and took what Bendis did and like fully gone wild with it. The thing I want to ask is, as a Superman fan, I've always gone Lex, Mixie, Bizarro, your live wires, like those rogues always kind of appeal me. The list along, I think Superman actually has a really good rogues gallery. I think people underrate it. What you've done with Mongol, though, is admittedly Mongol never really did it to me until you and Bendis come along, and then you suddenly introduce this lineage and these bonds. In a world where Thanos is in Infinity War and making billions of dollars, and Darkseid is in movies now, and Darkseid's everywhere, DC and kind of thing, what to you made Mongol appealing, and what made him different than that kind of big, bold archetype. Like, again, the similarities that what made Mongol to you is like, no, this guy's interesting. I can work with this.
Some of it was the things that had happened in the run previous to me.
Hmm.
The fact that Bendis had used him, and I'm trying to take into account the context in which I'm joining this mythology. I didn't want
Hmm.
to just firebomb it, start over. I wanted to take the ball that had been given to me and run with it, further down the field rather than just making up some new game. Um, that said, I feel like both Mongol and Warworld are both a little bit underserved. Not that you never see them in the books, because you do. They're both a little one-dimensional sometimes. Like
Definitely.
I feel like Mongol and I mean to the casual reader, Thanos and Darkseid and Mongol are all the same big muscly random color guy. That all kind of want the same thing and act a similar way. I mean, of the three, the most distinct is definitely Darkseid, but because he kind of has his own desires, his own background that makes him his own mythology that makes him more interesting.
Hmm.
And Thanos has his thing too, but Mongol is a little less distinct. If anything, he's just kind of tied up in the concept of Warworld, but Warworld is just kind of a big Death Star. Sometimes, depending on how it's treated, it's just a big metal ball with guns sticking out of it, and there's no beauty to it. There's nothing of interest there necessarily. Depending on how much time it's given on panel, or how much thought is given to what it represents. Um, so I wanted to see a world that mattered, and the more you think about what Warworld is supposed to be and who Mongol is to it, there's just so much potential there that we haven't seen yet. There's so much potential for Mongol to become his own character that is so different from the other two. And I wanted to see that. As a reader, I want to see that. I want to see Mongol that stands on his own two feet and just makes himself distinct from those other guys. But the concept of world is where the whole thing kind of grew out of. So in the Bendis run, and maybe before that, I'm not sure. It's established that pretty much every Mongol was at one point the son of the previous Mongol. Like every Mongol is killed by their son, and then the son takes over and becomes the new Mongol. So it's a title, not a name, and that was a cool concept. And Bendis also kind of simplified the Warzone thing and just said that, well, Mongol is of the Warzone race, like that Warzoons are now yellow, like he is, and that they are. That's what he is. He's a Warzone. That was not always the case. So that makes the whole thing a little simpler. Um, Warworld is like a space station, like a fortress that just goes from world to world, conquering different races, killing everyone they feel like killing, enslaving everyone who's left, bringing them to Warworld as slaves, and then they just go and do it again. They use up that planet's resources, and they go to the next one. That's how they pay the bills. Um, that makes Warworld this like a preserve of dead species across the universe in a way. Like if every time they blow through a place, they either kill or enslave everyone. So there's all these races that are gone because of Warworld, except for Warworld itself. That's where those races still exist. So it's kind of like this crazy intergalactic zoo
It's
of
like the
species that are
reverse version of Superman's Fortress Zoo, like turned evil.
exactly, exactly. And at some point, they do go extinct. Most of them, the ones that don't thrive, eventually go extinct. And so actually we'll see a ritual on Warworld where the last member of the race dies. We see what happens when that happens. Um, so yeah, it's this really interesting, rich place. Imagine what a world like that would look like on its surface or underneath. Like how a place where everyone you see is an endangered species um, that exists nowhere else in the universe, and it's become this crazy melting pot in a way, kind of beautiful and tragic ways. Beautiful but tragic melting pot of cultures like we've seen nowhere on Earth. You know, and Mongol is the one that has risen to the top of the heap in a place like that, a place where the concept of dominance is central to their culture, to the Warzone culture, the way that water scarcity is to the Fremen of Dune, where it colors every aspect of their life, of their culture, of their history. Dominance is everything there is, as shown by the chains that they wear, and that's like their cred, like their rep is they wear it on their wrists. The more badass you are, the longer your chain grows, and yeah, it's just I wanted to flesh it out and make it feel like a real place where the dominance was just there for all to see, where all these different alien cultures are there for all to see. Imagine what that culture would be like, how their economy works, what their weapons look like, what their architecture looks like, what the surface looks like, what it's like underneath. Is it metal all the way through there? Is there an atmosphere? I mean, there must be because they're all fucking breathing.
Yeah, but we never see that. We just see fire and stone and stuff like that.
Yeah. So let's say that there is an atmosphere. So it must rain then. And if it does, and if it really is metal, like we always see, that would explain why it's red. That is often portrayed as red because everything's rusting all the time. So you can see these almost like favelas that you see in Rio, where like these little containers or like little huts that kind of are built on top of each other for like miles. And the ones that are at the bottom are basically just like little piles of rust that are almost sinking into the ground. And the higher up you go, there are these new bits of metal that have been taken from conquered warships or cultures, that they just take pieces and they make little structures out of them and just stick them on top of Warworld. So as these old ones are sinking into the ground, turning to a rust swamp, the other ones build on top. So you can tell how old buildings are by how rusty they are. They have these huge seas that look like blood that are just iron oxide because of the electrical storms that keep that place running. And it's just the more you think about it, and if you answer every question with another question, Warworld becomes more and more a real place that is worthy of exploration, and it makes Mongol that much more interesting too. Because what would it take to dominate a place like that? To dominate that planet, as warlike a planet as it is, to dominate that the way that Genghis Khan was never able to conquer this planet, the way Alexander the Great could never do. What kind of a person would that be? And that's who Mongol is. So if you just answer these questions with more questions, it just makes the place much more interesting and rich and feel more legit. And especially, it's so exciting, man, especially now starting in January with Riccardo Federici coming on board, the guy that did The Last God with me, who is like, he's a horror savant. I mean, as far as like making these monstrous creatures that look super scary, and just alien cultures and monsters, he's the guy. There's nobody better than him in the world. And same thing for like sword and sandal stuff. There's nobody better than Riccardo. So he's going to be the ongoing artist in the book starting in January, and he is the perfect guy to bring Warworld to life. So if you're not reading action right now, anyone listening, please do.
Please do.
Starting in January, it's going to be the best fucking book. I mean, we're putting so much work into the world building, and Riccardo is doing the best work of his career. It's insane what's coming. So stay tuned.
Thank you, sir, for so much for doing this conversation with me. As
of course.
We get going on this, I feel we could talk for more and more time. But
well, look, I know I told you an hour because I'm busy, but if you want to do another couple of questions, we can stick around.
Okay, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, let's do another 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. There we have it, folks. The Geeks for Fun exclusive. All right, the person I think we've underserved in this Superman podcast that I've seen is Superman himself.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Clark. Specifically, you're coming at a Clark that you're not starting over. You're coming off the heels of not only Bendis, but from I hear like a heavy collaboration with Morrison and what he did, they did in Superman: The Authority, and coming off from that, we're bringing in the Clark who is married, has a mythology and a history behind him, has a son who's now old enough to be Superman. So he's kind of not even necessarily got the burden of being main Superman. It's a very new era for the character. I know James Tynion recently did like a big list of like the 5 eras of Batman, and like each era of Batman is differently. Superman's kind of harder to do that with, but you can if you just make it round. It's like you got pre-marriage, early days, kind of thing. What you've kind of walked into with Clark is definitely, to me, with the John stuff and this, a new era of Clark. How do you approach that? Like, what's your take on where Clark Kent is right now in his life?
Huh. That is a really great question. And thanks for what you said about a new era. That's very kind, and I would love that to be the
I mean,
case. I would love to be
that's not even necessarily phrased. That's just, as a Superman, I look through all the eras and stuff. It's like, well, yeah, this is the new one. It feels, hopefully the status quo sticks around, but even if it doesn't, people remember this time period, man. There's never been a Superman status quo like this.
Oh, thanks. It's sort of super exciting. He's not going to be on. I guess that's a spoiler, but he's not going to be on World forever.
Uh-huh.
Necessarily, and it's kind of the beginning of what it is. I'm treating it like a new era, and the War thing is kind of the first chapter of what I hope to be this very long run that that does continue to carry the status quo forward. There are a lot of things about the Gotham mythology, about the Bat stuff, the Bat family, and all that I admire very much. And there are elements of that I'm trying to incorporate into the super family as well. How Gotham is such a distinct city, and I would love for Metropolis to be distinct in that same way. I know that's a weird thing to say.
Thank you so much. For the longest time, that has been you look at the movies, right, or something. Gotham, Tim Burton, or Schumacher, or Nolan, they're all different. Metropolis, okay, it's kind of New York, maybe. Like, hearing you say that is like, I want you to War World Metropolis. The question after question after question. That sounds so good. That sounds so exciting.
Well, I do want to do that, and I hope to. I should shut up, but I want to make Metropolis more distinct and more. Like when you see Wakanda, you know where you are. When you see Gotham, you know where you are. And I want Metropolis to be that same way. And I'm going to go ahead and go on a limb and say that that's what we're going to do. But for right now, it's Warworld.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as Clark himself, I've got such a clear vision in my mind of who he is. And there are these moments that I've always had in my life, reading his comics, but also watching those films that just capture you, that make you just like shake your fist, like, yes, like this is what I want. Like I want to be that. I want to be like you just swell with love for Superman, of who he is, and just reminding you how good we can be and what we're capable of, And I can think of no better example than key moments from the 1978 film and the sequel as well, where moments like the Jor-El monologue when he's talking about who his son's going to be and all that, or when Superman's talking to his dad on the farm, or when Superman is, what's another moment?
The catching Lois for the first time always gets me.
Exactly, the helicopter scene. God, I know. Like he just and Christopher Reeve's portrayal. When he shows up and he grabs her and it's like, I've got you, and she's like, who's got me? Who's got you? And when he smiles at her with that pure, like, I'm here to help. Like, I'm your friend, and nothing bad's gonna happen to you. There's no ego in it. There's no machismo. There's no. It's just, I'm your friend. I love how there's no ego to it. It's just, I'm humble and compassionate and kind. Like I'm strong as hell. I can do anything, and the only thing I'm gonna do right now is just protect you. And John Williams' music is sailing while that's happening. The opening credits is like the most, like probably the most one of the most perfect parts of that movie, where you get the little it rises up and forth, and
it says Superman in the music.
Yeah.
It's like it's so
yeah. And like the S shield, kind of like they use that 3D thing, and like it kind of zooms at you, and then the names are kind of soaring over you. It's just, I'm getting chills right now just remembering that moment. They released that movie for the 40th anniversary a few years ago, and I brought my son to it, who was only like 4 something at the time. like about 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
And I cried in that moment. And I do not cry in movies much at all, or at all really. I'm not a big tearjerker dude, but man, I just like it was so powerful to see it again, and just remembering what it meant to me as a kid, and seeing him blown away, just like pure joy and excitement. It was just the most powerful experience. And I mean, that movie in a way shaped my life. I mean, like I became a professional trumpet player after that, and like I wrote my own stories about Superman. I remember how powerful that music was to me, as well as Christopher Reeve's portrayal. And and since then, now we've got Man of Steel and the Snyder films, and he is undeniably a more badass looking Superman as far as the physicality of it, and
They give him the
the
muscle
way,
suit, yeah.
yeah, the way the Kryptonian stuff looks, all the Krypton things that we see look incredible. All the characters like themselves look fucking amazing and perfect. Um, and there are elements of the story that I like very much, and like his portrayal is also great. Christopher Reeve will always have my heart. Like between his portrayal and the way he, like his face and everything, but it's also just his portrayal and the time in my life when I saw it. Christopher Reeve's always going to have my heart, and some of those lines too, and the way he gets them across, like the "Who's got you" scene, but also like, General, would you like to step outside? It's like almost this almost corny old world goodness to him that I just need Superman to have. I try to couple that and the John Williams music with like the physicality and the badass, the physically badass, crazy feats of amazing, shit.
Yeah, no,
That
I think that's something you're touching
I
on
try to
there.
I try to combine those elements.
That's something you're touching on
Sorry,
there
what
that
were
I
you saying?
think is really, really important for Superman. At least how I kind of prefer him to be done, is he is this complete beacon of good, but at the same time, that shouldn't be mistaken as like naive, or like Clark is so good because he can hear the entire world suffering, but he still wants to help. Like, it's not that he ignores that or anything. It's like he's fully aware. Like, again, he's married Lois Lane. He's married a cynic who knows the history of all. He's a reporter. He sees the ugly side of life. He's not someone who needs to have the lessons drilled into him because you're just a farm boy. Clark he's not. He's Superman. He knows what's up, and he knows how to handle himself in a fight. He is the top dog. But at the same time, it's balancing that in making that cool. Is like, goodness doesn't have to be tongue-in-cheek. It doesn't have to be parried. Like, I think you do a really great job as well, the many artists you've brought on, in letting Superman just be when he lands and he's just like, hey, it's gonna be okay, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, it's gonna be okay, it's Superman. It's like it's both uplifting and also kind of like fist pumping. Like, it's that balance of, because sometimes you get one way or the other, and I think that's a mistake that Superman fans make, is they go to the extremes. They either want all one way or want the other way. Whereas, like, I think he's a character who's so complex, and you can correct me or put your input here at any time, but he's a character that can really fit in any kind of story, and that's what makes him so good. But you really nail that balance of, he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet, but you would never want to meet him in a fight.
Right. And even that's another big difference in the portrayals, I guess. The portrayal of Christopher Reeve's version, even when he's going up against somebody, that he intends to take them down, there's never any like malice or even really aggression in it.
He never hates anyone.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess sometimes I see other portrayals where they just look like angry and like mean, and it's like, I'm gonna fuck you up kind of a look. And it's just a different approach. I'm always going for, in every issue, I'm going for those key moments that make those fist play moments, like, yeah, Superman, I want to be like you, kind of things, where you hear John Williams music play. There's something like that in issue 1033, I think, where I gave Daniel like a full page spread of Clark, John, and Kara coming down from the sun, like the sunlight's behind them, and they're like, everything's going to be okay now.
That's a gorgeous page.
Yeah, I know. And you hear John Williams' music in that moment. There was stuff like that in the House of L books, the House of L book that I did. and the future state issues, the other future state issues. I try to get something like that in every book, whether it be an image or like a line of dialogue or a scene where you just are reminded how powerful, but also how good he is. And there's one like that in the next issue too that I'm really excited for people to read. Where let's take one that in the issue that just hit. We just saw a kind of a gut wrenching issue 1037, the second issue of Warworld Saga.
Mm-hmm.
Superman and his team get fucked up bad.
Yeah. I phrased that because I think I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. It is the most complete destruction of the Superman win condition I've ever seen. And what I mean by that for like the audience thing is like in a Superman story, these are the things that happen to make him win at the end of the day. Is he'll just be too powerful, or he'll bring allies, or he'll inspire others to act, or he'll use the like all these things that Superman like in his direst hour. These moments are the things that come in and save him at the last minute. And everyone, it's almost like a checklist. You're like, okay, so Red Surd. Okay, so the authority's dead. Okay, so no one's gonna act anymore. We're gonna just do basically the one lesson from Krypton is that when nobody acts, when nobody moves, a world dies. Where people, Superman, the first lesson they tell you is Jor-El told the Science Council, we need to act. They ignored him. That's like the cardinal sin of the mythos. And you're like, right. Yeah, this is how he loses, is that happens again. I was like, oh my God, you fucked him up. Why'd you fuck up Clark so? You did the Remender thing. Like you said, it's like you put Clark in the worst position.
Yeah. So, the politicians screw him first. The authority goes down. I mean, Mongol is super prepared.
Mm-hmm.
He's got... the planet runs on red solar radiation now, which he did solely for this moment,
mm-hmm.
So that when Superman gets there, he's screwed. He's got a kryptonite spear. He's got a team that's better than Superman's team. All like the millions of people he's subjugating, the slaves, all think that Mongol's amazing because of this crazy propaganda machine he's got running there, which we'll see in the books. So even as Superman is there to save them all, they're cheering for Mongol to kill him instead, so that the people won't act. And in the end, Mongol uses his love of all life as a distraction to kill him. So yeah, it's rough. Yeah, you're right. That was actually it's very insightful that you said that, because it took everything that might have done it for him and took them all away one by one. And it's rough, but there still has to be moments in the story though where you feel that Superman fist pumping moment, and there are a couple of those even in that story that I had to put in there.
Yeah, and I think that's go ahead. Sorry.
So the story is not just a straight up emotional beating from beginning to end,
right? But it's almost worse than it's like you give them that little bit of hope, and then yeah.
I mean, Light Ray's death was one of those where she reminds them, like, don't lose heart. They just don't know who you are yet. They're shouting like Mongol, Mongol, Mongol as she's dying, broken. And she's like, it's okay. Like, they just don't know who you are yet. But they will. You're going to save them all. And there's another moment where Mongol is like, what does he say? Like, as they're chanting his name, they're like, the people that you came here to save want me to kill you. They don't even want your help. They didn't ask for your help. And then Superman gets in a good hit, and he's like, one of them did. And even though his team is going down, even though the people he came to save are all chanting for his death, he was sent there by one slave, and that's why he's there, and that's why he will never give up. So it was important for me that we see those moments. And we get some of those in the next issue too. It's not like everything is suddenly better in the next issue. It's rough too.
I mean, you've killed Superman. The book's over now. Sorry, folks. Wrap it up. Clark's done.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the last issue of Action Comics.
I can't believe they let you do it.
I know that you should have heard the pitch meeting. It was awesome. Like, we're gonna kill Superman forever, never coming back. It's gonna be great. And they're like, yeah, instant profit.
Dear.
I was pleasantly surprised by the reaction. People were actually pretty kind about how the book was. I expected to be a lot of, because there's all these theories out there online. It's all the conspiracy to kill Superman, replace him with John because of some copyright bullshit or whatever. And none of it's true. And even as I wrote the scene where Superman gets stabbed and apparently killed, I knew I could hear the trolls already. Like, see, we told you, I was right. He
Yeah.
killed Superman. And I was like, someone's like, they're totally going to say that, and they're going to think they're right, and it's so frustrating. But this is what the story needs. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. But spoilers, Superman's not dead.
You get all the
um,
exclusives here on Geeks for Fun, folks. You'll
yeah,
never see that one coming.
exactly. I
Uh,
know, I know. So I mean, there's, we've seen Catwoman get her brains blown out, Nightwing brains blown out. Supergirl just got stabbed or shot through the heart with multiple arrows. Crypto also. It's all just smoke and mirrors. Everything's going to be fine.
mm-hmm.
So don't worry. If you're pissed at me for killing Superman, don't worry. He's not dead.
The most exciting thing, I guess, to end us up on that is with regards to Clark, is we bring him to such a low, and you said you've got this plan for like a long thing. I guess this is so hard to talk into without spoilers, but I guess that's your challenge.
Yeah, right.
What are the kind of emotional places you're excited to take Clark to places we may not have seen him before, or maybe, like you say, you're trying to reach a larger audience with this, trying to think people, places that you think Superman should be used more, or like where's his journey going, and that's like what's some things, because we've shown him in this, we've seen him angry, you've shown him cry, you've put him through the ringer, is like, and again we've barely started your run, so I have to imagine that's not the end of it.
We're going to see, well, kind of like we did in Worlds of War. I wanted to show. Okay, so there was the debate in Worlds of War where the one girl, Sadie, tries to explain to everyone else like what makes Superman great, like why he was who he was, and even if he hadn't any powers, if his powers never manifested, he still would have been Superman. He would have found other ways to save us. He would have just used his capabilities in other ways. Mm-hmm. And the one troll that's there at the hang is like, no, man, he wasn't Superman because he told the truth all the time. He's Superman because he's the biggest and strongest and fastest, and that's why he always wins. And there's people that believe that, and I get it. I know he's got cool power set, but we're going to take all that away and see if he's still Superman. We're going to see how Superman is Superman without all that. And I know I'm not the first one to do that. I know he's been underpowered or non-powered other times. This is a different story. And I mean, it makes sense to take a paragon of virtue and strength like Superman and either take away his powers or make him evil, right? Those are two tropes that we've seen done before. But it's all in the execution, and we have a very different plan for Superman. There's different reasons why he's depowered this time. And he knew it was going to be that way when he went up there. He knew that as we saw in Action 1030, he was already radiation poisoned because of things that happened before that. And but he couldn't not go, just because he wasn't as strong as he usually is. He's not gonna. Is Clark Kent, Superman, not gonna go to Warworld to free slaves because he's not quite as strong as he was yesterday? The answer has to be no. It's not like he's not going to free slaves because he's lost a step. So instead, he puts together the authority to go with him. So we're going to see how he goes forward now without his power. Now that he's lost, we see what he does next. See if he's still Superman without all that stuff. But in the future, we're also going to see him. What am I going to spoil here? I can't. Okay, I almost stepped in just now. I shouldn't spoil any. I shouldn't spoil it.
No. Save the surprise.
Bluntly.
We can always do another one next time after those things. You can be like, I was going to tell you this.
Yeah. I will say the Superman that I like to see is more in line with Grant's take.
Oh.
As far as his power set and how like over the top godlike he is. I love Superman to have this insane power level. So without any spoilers, I'll just say that's my preference. It's not like I don't love seeing Superman getting his ass kicked or like to have his powers lost. That made sense for the story that we're telling now in Action Comics, but it's also very important to Grant's run in Superman of the Authority. That him losing a step power wise and forming the Authority, that was all crucial to the story that Grant was telling. So it makes sense for what we're doing now, but it's not where I like to see him. I like to see him incredibly powerful, doing insane feats of power and strength, even while using those feats to, to save the least of us.
And what that makes
I will
to
say
go ahead, sorry. I just wanted
another
to
another. No, no, go ahead, please.
what I wanted to say that is makes perfect sense that you as Philip Kennedy Johnson, the world builder, likes that, because the argument I always give, because I get people who leave comments and stuff like Superman's OP, Superman's boring. The reason why I think it makes sense that you as a world builder like Ultimate Powerful Superman is because think of that as a storyteller. You can put him anywhere. He can live in any environment. That means you can explore anywhere. You can take him to any environment, in black holes, in the middle of stars, in new dimensions, all these kind of things. That's like candy, where you can't do that with, you can try with other characters, it's harder. With Superman, you can just stick him in there and he'll be fine. He's Superman.
Yeah, yeah. No, we have big plans. Big plans
Oh,
for
okay,
Superman.
then I'll...
I will also say that when I first got the book, the thing that a lot of readers were most excited for were like, yes, now somebody can make John 10 again. And when I didn't do that, a lot of people got real, real pissed.
Mhm.
And they didn't understand that a lot of it was that. I mean, I was brought on board to do both books for like 6 months just to kind of tee up Tom Taylor for his run.
Mhm.
And they already had all these plans for Johnathon. So it was not completely in my control to just be like, yeah, cool, we'll make John 10, because we already had plans not just for Tom Taylor's run for this second Superman character, but also his role in Legion, the role for other stories he's going to be a part of going forward here. We're not writing these characters in a vacuum. There's all kinds of other books that rely on the plans that had already been written for John. So it wasn't entirely up to me, but even if it was, I wouldn't have done it. In part because I didn't want to disrespect the readers or the characters or the other creators by just like waving a wand and just saying like, I don't like this decision, so we're just going to change it all for no reason. It was important to me to go forward, not back. And I will say there's stuff coming that I think that, how should I say this? The reason people want John Young again is because they love seeing Superman in the context of that super like nuclear family kind of vibe that they had going for a while. And we're going to find other ways to get those same kind of feelings from the book without actually undoing John's whole character arc, just destroying everything he's been through since he was a little kid. We're going to keep John intact, tell a lot of great stories with him. But I also love the family dynamic that we had with the Tomasi run and Jurgens too, and we're going to find other ways to kind of scratch that itch, in the Metropolis group of books,
Right.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to satisfying those fans as well.
Absolutely crazy stuff for the future on this. Again, we've continued to go past the time alive.
It's okay. I appreciate you being mindful of it. I appreciate you trying to stick to the time I gave you, even though I chose to go over. So thanks for that.
No, it's
thanks
entirely
for that kindness.
I'm having the time of my life talking Superman with Very Action Comics. I could go through. I guess man. If you still up for, we can do one more question, or
yeah, sure, I'll do one more.
Okay, we'll do one more. What's a good final one? I guess I'd be remiss to mention this. I'm currently at my partner's house, and we've been working on a little Lois Lane thing ourselves. So, how do you feel about Lois has been featured quite a bit? I remember in some interviews leading up to you, and you're like, "Well, it's cosmic, so Lois isn't going to be so much as in it." But there's been a lot of good Lois features. What's your take on her relationship with Superman, especially in a place where they have a son who's older now and that kind of thing? Like, you mentioned Christopher Reeve movies as a big inspiration, and obviously they're very romance focused. What does Superman's relationship with Lois Lane mean in this run and stuff?
Well, so the relationship with Lois is not one, at least the one that I see now, that's one that I do not look to the old movies or the old comics for. I'll tell you why. when the books I was learning to love Superman on as a kid, those books I was reading were old even when I got it. I was reading a lot of Golden Age, Silver Age.
A lot of
Um,
marry me, Clark Superman kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. Well, more like, Clark Kent's like, oh, I got the sniffles. I'm a big lame ass, and Lois is like, you're a big lame ass. I'm not a big fan of Clark Kent. Clark, you're so lame. And then the big jock flies in, and she's like, I'm so impressed. She's just so into Superman, and the nice guy is always getting the shaft, and it did not speak well of Lois, in my opinion, back then. In the old dated version of the Superman Lois thing, I was never like I always liked Lana Lang better. Um, I was never a big fan of Lois really back then.
Hmm.
Now the way plus she was always getting in trouble. I don't know. I just the whole dynamic like she's you kind of shitty to Clark. She get in trouble. Superman's like just jump in. She was very tenacious, but otherwise I didn't see a whole lot of virtue in the character. These days she's super badass, and I thought that getting the whole smoke and mirrors hat and glasses thing out of the way and just letting them really know each other was really cool. I know it was a big change in status quo, and I'm sure at the time there were people who were super pissed about it. Um, or I'm sure people were pissed about the marriage too, whether it be an editorial or fans. I don't know because it just anytime there's a big change like that, people take it
It
hard.
always happens, yeah.
But it makes sense to me that like Superman has seen this very slow progression of mythology when going from the all the pretending to I'm going to tell you the truth to now we're married, now we have a son, now he's grown. The super family has moved forward, and the Bat family too to some degree in a way that a lot of super characters kind of don't. Um, so I think that where they're at now is a way healthier place for Superman and Lois to be, where Lois is arguably just as powerful as Superman in such a different way. She's just this ultimate truth finder and truth teller that just complements these characters. So they're so completely different. I mean, completely different characters, but they're also so um, they complete each other so well. Like
Hmm.
it's such a great partnership. They're not the same, and no one is um, like no one is dominant over the other. They just complete this amazing power couple. And I love that. I love how different they are. I love the dynamic of how they talk to each other. Everything from their difference in personality, like you say, like the cynic versus optimist, to the spelling stuff, to the way they interact with John, and it's just fucking awesome. I just love that dynamic. I didn't used to. It's been really nice to see that relationship become what it is because now I think it's just such an awesome place that I just never had growing up.
It's made
Um,
for better stories. As it's kind of an example of
yeah,
like the changes of comics have led to these characters don't necessarily come out with the best ideas straight away. Sometimes it takes years and years of messing with the concept, seeing different pieces together. And I agree with you. I think
yeah.
I like the early days stuff as being like flashback stuff of like they went through that to get here, and maybe they joke about it to John or something, gets embarrassed. It's like, oh my god, mom, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you were that shallow or something. But or dad, I can't believe you're such an idiot. Why did you lie to her so much? But now you get to
Well,
this where
yeah,
they're so open to each other and they're so truthful to each other. This is their strongest dynamic. This is their strongest partnership. It lets Lois as well have more freedom from stories when she's in on it and she's accustomed with the world of Superman. You get to have her be doing reporting and doing truth on a grander scale like he does, not necessarily just being like subservient. Is she's speaking truth to powers Clark Kent could never dream of because she's just better at that part of the job than he is.
yeah, yeah. I'm really glad that the old stuff is gone, and some of it I understand is also society norms. Like it's we're in such a different place in society now than we were when those really old comics were written. Just a completely different country. Um, so yeah, it didn't speak highly of Lois, but also of Clark either. Like
Mm-hmm.
even reading the old stuff, this character, even as a kid,
He's an asshole.
Yeah, even as a kid, I kind of didn't. It didn't quite square with me that he was lying to everyone all the time. Like this beacon of truth and justice is just constantly lying to everybody. And I understand that there's like supposedly it's for good reasons. Like, yeah, I was trying to protect everyone, and that kind of became this cliche that every superhero had to have a secret identity and had to lie to everyone constantly because Superman did. It sort of was part of it. I think even Captain America once, like originally, when he was in the the European theater in war, he was pretending to be this lame ass private all the time. It was like clumsy and tripping over people and all that. And then he would later on put on his mask and become Captain America, be this really kick ass person, and then he'd go back to being private lame ass again. It was just kind of this norm that every superhero kind of conformed to, and it was one that I found frustrating, even when I was young. Like, why do we have to do this? Can't you just be Superman all the time? Even if you just couldn't you be a writer? Like I did, well I do anyway now. Really love that he's a journalist. That he chooses to save the world and make the world a better place as a writer, even when he's not, you know, punching ice monsters. Like when he's just being a guy, he's still doing everything he can, using his skills and talents in a way that makes the world a better place, even when he's not. When he's not being a superhero. I mean, because I hold journalists in the highest regard, when it's done well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that old version was kind of a weakness that both of them showed, and that now they can just be journalists, be the best version of what that profession should be, and tell the truth and everything. Especially now that Superman's secret identity is gone, which that was a big swing. I was surprised when Bendis did that, but it doesn't bother me the way it bothers some. I know I've heard some people say that it kind of basically takes away the whole Lois and Clark dynamic. And I get that perspective, but I also think that it makes more sense for the Superman character to tell everyone the truth. It's even going back to the Superman and Lois TV show and seeing him lie to his kids. And that, I mean, the cat's out of the bag very early on in the show. And very soon they're all on the same page, but it establishes that he's been lying to his children for the last 15 years or however old they are.
And even in the books, they had that with John for a bit, is that he didn't
find
out his dad was Superman until he was like 12.
I know. It's kind of hard to go back to now that I'm all, when I got caught up in all the Bendis stuff and it was all like out in the open. It's hard to go back to the stuff where his own family doesn't know. So yeah, anyway, that's another thing that I thought I was okay with, and I'm okay with the new status quo, and I haven't decided whether we're going to keep it that way or what to do like down the line. But for now, I have no plans to address it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, anyway, I know it's a super long rambling answer to your question about Superman and Lois, but I really think that the way that relationship has evolved, and through the relationship, the way the Lois character has evolved is purely for the better, because now she's this amazing character that, I mean, like Rucka wrote a Lois series, right? That like just, it was all about just her alone. She's awesome. And I think they're the power couple in comics that I just always love to see on the page together.
Well, there we have it. Go ahead.
I will say one challenge to the whole Warworld saga is like Lois is out of it now. Like because it doesn't make sense for her to be there. He would never bring Lois with her up there.
No. It's
like the most dangerous of places. He's like a slave, and like there's no way we could. It just doesn't make sense for her to be there. So how do we work her into the story? And I will say that we've kind of found a solution to that question. So if readers can be patient for a little bit, we're going to get back to the Superman and Lois relationship as soon as we can, as soon as it makes sense to do so.
That's really exciting news. I didn't expect it to be. Obviously, again, like you mentioned before, we got larger plans in the room, but to hear that you've found a way to think like that and bring in more characters and keep the world like that, which I think is a strength of your run so far, is it's not necessarily that we're always focused on Clark, because we're seeing the ramifications across Earth, across different planets, across Atlantis, across the United States military. Like, this is a Superman who really feels like every time he takes a step, the world takes notice and the universe takes notice. So you getting Lois involved in whatever capacity you have, that's really exciting for me.
Well, thanks, man.
Well, I guess this is the final thing. Where can people find you, sir? And what other things that are upcoming that you want people to have eyes on, be it old or new?
Let's see, things to look out for. So the Last God from DC Black Label has been collected in hardcover now, like pretty recently, and it's super beautiful. It's the most incredible volume. It's this big hardcover with an unthinkable amount of content in it. I'm incredibly proud of it. So please pick that up. It's all the artwork of Riccardo Federici, who is going to be the ongoing artist in Action Comics, as we said, starting in January. So please check that out to see what's coming as far as what he's capable of, because he's the most amazing artist. Please look for that. Upcoming stuff. Let's see. We're in the middle of Alien. So Alien has been interrupted for a bit due to some printing issues. But I think 8 issues of Alien are out. We're in the middle of the second arc right now, and the next issue comes out the first week of February, I believe. But then that'll be continuing hopefully monthly after that, and continuing for the foreseeable future. I've got a Carnage issue coming out in February. I've kind of fallen into the Carnage mythology, which is really fun. I wrote Extreme Carnage earlier this year, and now I'm doing a one-shot alongside Rom V, my friend from DC stuff. Let's see. This past week, Action 1037 came out, the second issue of the Warworld Saga, as did Gotham City Villains. We have a Ra's al Ghul story in there, also drawn by Riccardo, which was incredible. All based around a chess game between the two of them, but also a lot of action and amazing work by Riccardo. What else? We've got a big announcement coming out in a couple of months, I think. Another new licensed book that I'm going to be writing that I'm extremely excited about. Get to scratch my Ed Brubaker itch and kind of show how I've been inspired by that guy. That'll be announced probably in a month or two. What else do you need to know? Yeah, so I have a website, philipkennedyjohnson.com, 2 L's in Philip. And I'm on Facebook under my full name, Twitter at Philip K. Johnson, Instagram, my full name with underscores between each one. Yeah, I think that's about it. So look me up. Please look for my work and the work of my amazing artists I get to work with. And for this guy, Alfie, thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you very much. It's been my absolute pleasure. All the links from Mr. Philip Kennedy Johnson will be in the description and the pinned comment, so you guys can all check out that and go see the different stuff. Again, super exciting stuff. I know it's been a while since I've done this series again, but when I want to do these things, I want to make it special for people, so I don't just necessarily want to think. I want to do Superman justice in very much the same way you talked about writing, where it's just like, if it's not good enough, I don't really want to do it yet. So thank you for letting me get a chance to talk Superman on this channel again. He's my favorite fictional character, so it always means a lot to be able to geek out a little bit with someone who loves it just as much as me, if not more so than me, which is, I tip my hat to you. It's really thankful to see someone who has such an emotional resonance with the character, kind of shepherding him in this new era. So I'm going to be checking out every single issue that comes, and I'm really excited to see the future of the book.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. We're real excited to show you what's coming next, so please stay tuned.
We will do. And for all of you watching, have fun, geeks. Goodbye.
Thanks, Alfie.